Hi guys, Shelley Fitzgerald here. I want to talk to you about the hover feature on a BERNINA sewing machine. And so there's two different kinds of hover. The one I'm showing you right now is presser foot hover. And it's awesome because it allows you to be able to get the foot close to your project and then situate it exactly where you need it. Now, the thing that might surprise some of you not, is how to set that so that you can then hold the fabric well. And all you have to do is lightly tap. Don't hold, but tap the go button. And the foot set. Now my project is held. So if you want to get that presser foot hover to hold, all you do is lightly tap. You also, here I'll go back and now it's hovering and I can situate my project. I also could lightly tap the toe of the foot. And now it is held. It makes that hover drop. Or I could just begin stitching. I don't even have to set the foot into hover. I can just start sewing. Or if I was in hover, then I could just start sewing. So that is the presser foot hover, and that is different than needle down hover. So you'll notice I'm sewing needle down. So when I stop stitching, the needle will be down in the fabric. Now I've got my needle down hover turned totally off because I use my freehand system, my knee lift, all the time. But the needle down hover is incredibly helpful, and let me show you how to fix that. I am on a BERNINA 880 Plus, but the settings for this are the same, sorry for the wiggles, on all of the machines. So here is your settings button. Yours might be underneath the screen, but there's the gears. And I'm going to go into my sewing settings, and I'm going to touch the creepy white hand. And here is the presser foot up and down hover that we were just talking about. And that is adjustable. But the default is 2 millimeters. So that's the one that we just looked at. I'm going to use the cookie crumbs and go back. And here is needle down hover. And I have it set so that when I finish sewing, it does nothing. I could change so that when I stop sewing, it's going to hover. And it will hover at the height of my presser foot hover. So let's see what that looks like. So now when I stitch and stop, it hovered. And it hovered just that little tiny 2 millimeter amount. And that way I could pivot. This is really handy when you want to stop and turn, maybe doing some applique, and you don't have the freehand system in, or you weren't going to be using that, then that presser foot or that needle down hover is incredibly handy. So let's look at the last setting on the hover. So I'm going to go back into the setup menu, the gears, back to the sewing settings, back to the creepy white hand, and back to my needle down. And here, this hover would allow it to go to its very highest height. Now maybe I'm making a bag with a lot of thick batting. So let's look at what that hover looks like. Now when I stop, it's going to go clear up. Look how big that is. So if I were working on something that had a lot of bulk and volume, then that might be a really helpful way to have the hover stop. Now this is only needle down hover. So I'm going to change from needle down to not needle down. And you'll see that when I stop sewing, there is no hover. it holds the fabric. But even with the needle down up, the other kind of hover, this is your presser foot hover, that is different. That isn't sewing, that's positioning your fabric. So then if I start sewing, that sets. Okay, so you have two kinds of hover, and that is how you handle those. I guess since we're here, we should talk about the last part. We referred to that a second ago. The hover that is the presser foot up and down hover, you can alter that. So let's just say I needed that for a bigger project, that when I began to hover, when I began to position my projects under the foot, I'm going to go all the way to the maximum, 6 millimeter. And so let's say that I'm positioning a really thick something. And so now my presser foot hover is really high. But that still has nothing to do with needle down. That is so that I can get my project under the foot exactly where I want it, and then either tap the start button or just begin sewing. This is Shelly with Sew Shelly Quilts. Bye for now.